In fact, Eddie Van Halen was a huge lover of the first generation of British rock guitar players, and Pete Townshend was one of them. Eddie met almost all of his guitar heroes. He used to have their home phone numbers and could call them any time of the day or night to tell them how much he loved them. I mean, that's so cool. Eddie actually covered many classic rock songs, like the Kinks song, You Really Got Me. His favorite Who song was apparently Won't Get Fooled Again, which Van Halen covered in 1992. Many rock bands, the Yardbirds, Deep Purple, Kiss, were influenced by The Who, and The Who were actually influenced by the Kinks. When American singer, songwriter, and dancer Michael Jackson was making his sixth studio album Thriller in 1982, he wanted to do a rock song. So he wrote the song Beat It, and that was his first attempt at a rock song. Steve Lukather was invited as a session player and came up with those great guitar riffs on the song. In 1984, Michael Jackson explained, I wanted to write the type of song that I would buy if I were to buy a rock song. That is how I approached it, and I wanted the children to really enjoy it, the school children as well as college students. Michael Jackson and his producer Quincy Jones wanted a rock guitar legend to record a guitar solo to beat it. So they came up with the idea to bring rock guitar pioneer Pete Townshend in the studio. So Michael Jackson called Pete and said, hey Pete, we were making a great album and I wrote a rock song on to please the kids. So we need a cool guitar solo. We want you to work on it. Are you interested? As Pete Townshend was never really a solo guitar player, he declined the offer by saying, hey Michael, I can't do that. I'm not the guy you're looking for, but there's a young hot guitar player, Eddie Van Halen. He's brilliant. Kids love him. That's the guy you need. So Pete Townshend recommended Eddie Van Halen to record a guitar solo on Beat It. When Michael Jackson called Eddie, he said, hey Eddie, we need a guitar solo. Pete Townshend recommended you to us. So Eddie was really happy to hear that one of his guitar heroes had recommended him to Michael Jackson. I mean, really cool. So he called Pete Townshend and said, hi Pete, thanks a lot for recommending me. I love you, man. Pete Townshend later revealed, I was once asked by Michael Jackson to play electric guitar on the Thriller album. I said I couldn't do it, but recommended Eddie, who called, and we chatted. He was utterly charming, happy about the connection, but told me how much he was also enjoying playing keyboards. His smile was just classic, a man in his rightful place, so happy to be doing what he did. Initially, Eddie Van Halen was contacted by Michael Jackson's producer, Quincy Jones. And on a side note, I personally have been to Quincy Jones's house, and it's in the Bel Air Hills there, right next to the Beverly Hills, with a great view of the Pacific Ocean. Really cool. So anyway, at first when Quincy called, Eddie thought he was receiving a prank call. Having established that the call was genuine, Van Halen used a Hartley Thompson amplifier borrowed from guitarist Alan Holdsworth and recorded his guitar solo free of charge. I did it as a favor, Eddie later said. And he also says, I was a complete fool according to the rest of the band, our manager, and everyone else. I was not used. I knew what I was doing. I don't do something unless I want to do it. So Eddie Van Halen refused payment for his work, but was given free beer, as Eddie joked about later. Jackson's Thriller ironically went to the #1 spot on the charts, pushing 1984 to #2. In fact, 1984 went 5 times platinum a year after its release. Van Halen's lead single Jump became the band's first and only #1 pop hit and garnered them a Grammy nomination. Eddie recorded his contribution following Jones and Jackson arriving at the guitarist's house with a skeleton version of the song. Steve Lukather and Eddie Van Halen were already good friends at that point. They would jam together all the time. Steve Lukather recalls, initially we rocked it out as Eddie had played a good solo, but Quincy thought it was too tough. So I had to reduce the distorted guitar sound, and that is what was released. 2 versions of the solo were recorded. Eddie Van Halen revealed in 2015 that he also rearranged the song and asked Jones to edit the chords so a solo could be in the key of E. Initially, Eddie was unsure of what he could add to a pop song. So he played along with the song and ended up restructuring the song and adding the classic guitar solo. In a 2012 CNN interview, Eddie Van Halen revealed, "I listened to the song and I immediately said, 'Can I change some parts?' I turned to the engineer and said, 'Okay, from the breakdown, chop in this part, go to this piece, pre-chorus to the chorus, out.' Took him maybe 10 minutes to put it together, and I proceeded to improvise 2 solos over it." He also added, "I was just finishing the second solo when Michael Jackson walks in. And you know how artists are kind of crazy people. We're a little bit strange. I didn't know how he would react to what I was doing. So I warned him before he listened and I said, 'Hey, look, I changed the middle section of your song.' Now, in my mind, he's either going to have his bodyguards kick me out for butchering his song or he's going to like it." And so he gave it a listen and he turned to me and says, "Wow. Thank you so much for having the passion to not just come in and blaze a solo, but to actually care about the song and make it better." So Michael Jackson liked the idea and was kept in the final track. In 1985, after David Lee Roth quit the band, Eddie needed a singer and considered collaborating with Pete Townshend, who was a singer, great rhythm guitar player, and songwriter. But eventually it didn't happen because Pete wanted to work in London and Eddie was loath to exclude his brother Alex and Michael Anthony from the project. After all, Eddie lost Pete's phone number at this time and just abandoned the idea altogether. But now in 1992, Van Halen covered The Who's hit song "Won't Get Fooled Again" live. The song was written by Pete Townshend and released as a single in June 1971. It reached the top 10 in the UK, while the full version appeared as the final track on the band's 1971 album Who's Next, the only album which the band topped the chart with. The Who often performed it as the set closer, and that was the last song drummer Keith Moon played live with the band. I seen the Who with Keith Moon in 1976, and yeah, that was towards like the last song, and it was awesome. Pete Townshend did that thing where he goes sliding across the stage on his knees. It was really cool. And on Won't Get Fooled Again, besides electric and acoustic guitar, Pete Townshend used an AMS VCS3 synthesizer and Lowry organ. Eddie Van Halen rearranged the track so that the synthesizer parts were played on the guitar. A live recording was released on Live, Right Here, Right Now, and made it to #1 on the Billboard Album Rock Tracks chart. Eddie Van Halen is well known for jumping on stage, one of his trademarks, and the song "Jump" was kind of a salute to Pete Townshend. When Eddie Van Halen died, Pete Townshend said, "It's completely tragic that we have lost him. He was not just an innovative and stylish player with great taste, he was also a laid-back virtuoso showman who just blew us all away every time. Every shredder today has lost their master teacher and guide." As he got older, he became more generous and amusing and self-effacing about his enormous gifts. He shared so many tricks through guitar workshops, online, and on TV shows. Immense talent. The great American guitar player. I was hoping he might be president someday. That's Pete Townshend talking.